Well, you may have heard about the new workplace trend called quiet quitting. The definitions vary, but many employees say it's empowering, while employers say it's dangerous. Joining us now to help us understand this workplace trend is John Quinterno. He's a professor at the Duke Sanford School of Public Policy and the founder of an economic consulting firm. Good morning to you. Thanks for being on the program this morning. Now, for those of us hearing about this term for the first time, help us understand what quiet quitting is.
Well, thanks, Ken. And I think the term has definitely popped up a lot in the past few weeks. A lot of news stories have been written, but it really is a term that doesn't have any particular definition and doesn't really have any data behind it. I think the general idea is that it's often a complaint by employers that workers are, particularly post-COVID, and we're talking predominantly about employers in professional settings, that workers are more limiting themselves to doing what is actually in their job description and the work that they're actually being paid for, and not necessarily taking on the work of multiple employees anymore.
So, Professor Quinterno, this isn't necessarily something new. Why is it getting so much attention right now?
Well, I think really it's a function of the pandemic. For most of the past 40 years, the balance of power in the workforce or in the economy between workers and firms has shifted largely in employers' favors, in the favor of employers. And since the pandemic and for a little bit during the recovery, we've had a period where workers have had a little more power shifted back to them. And so I think really what we're getting at is that sort of clash, and particularly with maybe employers who haven't adopted to the new reality, maybe a little bit of a temper tantrum and trying to go back to the way things were before COVID.
So I got to ask you, is there some justification for this on employees' part? I mean, is it noticeable? And the big question is it worth it for an employee to do this? Well,
I think as I mentioned earlier, there really is no data around any of this. And in fact, many of the news stories that have run in major papers have actually run in the style section of the paper, not the news section, which is something I find interesting. But I think for employees, many employees over the past number of years have been stressed. They've been asked to take on more and more work. Wages have been flat, benefits cut back, workplaces have become much more insecure and precarious. And I think COVID, with some of the shutdown, and then, of course, the shift to remote work for professional employees, really gave people an opportunity to reevaluate and to really rethink about what happens in the workplace and what they do and how they interact in the employment space.
Now, to that end, we should know that employers are sharing a trend of their own, calling it quiet firing. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think that is sometimes the idea being that do certain employers just not stop investing in employees or certain employees and just sort of very subtly try to send signs that maybe you should look to move elsewhere without actually going through and firing folks, which would also trigger certain potential costs, like if you fire the person for a reason not related to cause, you would have unemployment insurance come into play, all those kinds of issues.
Yeah. Is there common ground, really quickly, I've got about 10 seconds, is there common ground here that employers and employees can reach?
I think really what we're going to need to see is more enlightened employers really will start thinking again about use the pandemic and the changes that have occurred as a way to rethink the ways in which they attract employees, compensate them, ask them to take on responsibilities, and adjust to the new environment.
Professor John Quinterno with Duke University, helping us understand this workplace trend called quiet quitting. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.